Righto, doing a bit of a video up. Hopefully we can get a demonstration of the performance difference between a couple of different suppressors. We've got a Browning T-bolt chambered in 22 magnum. I have loaded 40 grain Winchester standard Super X ammo. It's 40 grainers. They're doing 1910 feet per second, so the box says. And I've also loaded some 30 grain VMAX projectiles. That's a Hornady load. They are doing 2200 feet per second, so a little bit quicker, a little bit lighter. I'm going to compare the two. Now, the test that we're doing, and the reason why I'm doing this is we're just going to see whether we get much performance increase with using a large suppressor on a small caliber like the 22 Magnum versus a small suppressor, which is just standard that you would get if you bought it as a package. So, fitted up at the moment, I've got a DPT Magnum. This one is a so this is suitable right up to your sort of large Magnums, 260s and 7 rem mag and all these sorts of things. Now, being fitted on a 22 Magnum, you could say that's certainly overkill. I reckon that's probably a pretty fair argument. But the intention was to have one suppressor and be able to interchange it with different firearms. So, just out of interest, we thought we'll just test fire it and see whether we get much performance difference with that and with a standard cheapy pressed rimfire Magnum suppressor. So this is about as cheap as it gets, and this is about as flash as it gets. So it should be, hopefully it'll be an interesting little test to see whether I get a lot more or whether I just get a little bit more performance difference. So what I'm going to do, I've loaded the magazine. I've got first round fired will be a 30 grain VMAX. Then the next shot will be the Winchester 40 grainers. Just see if we can see any difference between the noise between those two. And then I'll take the suppressor off and shoot it with it off. Then I'll put the little rimfire suppressor on, shoot it with it on. We might go back and see what the big suppressor sounds like again, just as a comparison. So I'll go through and just shoot those. So I'll load that up. Didn't bring my muffs today, so I'm just going to use plugs, so bear with me for a second. Righto, so first shot will be the 30 grainers with the big Magnum suppressor on. We'll see if we can see any, hopefully this will record and give us an indication of the noise that it creates. And just out of interest, I'm shooting it at a steel plate at 100 metres, so hopefully you hear the report of the round hitting the steel plate. That was a 30 grainer. And that was a 40 grainer. Now with my plugs in my ears, I could notice no difference between the two. So I presume that that will be the case with the recording, but I'll play it back to myself later and we'll be able to hear. So this is with the two shots, one of the 30 and one of the 40 grainer, no suppressor. So the suppressor certainly sounds like it's doing a pretty reasonable sort of job comparing those two. We'll go now to the little cheapy rimfire suppressor. So these are like, I don't know, 60 bucks versus the big one, which is 405. So she's a fair difference in price between the two. We'll just see whether there's much difference in performance. Being such a small cartridge, I'd say probably there won't be too much difference, but we'll soon find out. So this, again, this is the 30 grainer first. And that was the 40 grainer. Now, I reckon that sounded pretty similar to the big suppressor. So I might just go back to it and we'll have a little look and see if we can compare the two. I certainly didn't notice much difference between the two rounds, the 40 grainer and the 30 grainer. I would have thought maybe because the 30 grainer was higher velocity it might have been maybe a little louder or something like that, but I really can't notice much difference with the hearing protection in. And certainly pretty significant reduction irrespective of the with the plugs in. With the suppressor on, both suppressors are doing a pretty reasonable job in comparison to no suppressor. All right. Well, maybe it's a little quieter. I certainly wouldn't say that there was $335 difference between the two of them. Bought you much more performance, but certainly it's probably a little quieter than the rimfire one. But yeah, if it were just being set up on a 22 Magnum, I'd suggest it's really not necessary. I certainly understand the concept, because that same suppressor will come off that and can go onto a 243 or a large 22 Magnum, the 220 Swift or something like that, and they'll do a fantastic job for that too. So, and that's probably where you're going to get obviously a significant difference with a lot more powder being burnt. Righto, I'll play that video back to myself now, and hopefully I can see if there's any sort of differences. Cheers.